Hello, my name's Shade and today I'm going to be discussing all the books I read this summer. This video is going to be in two parts. The first part is going to be anything that's not a novel, essentially, so like poetry, graphic novels, those kinds of things. And then part two will be all the novels that I read this summer. When I say summer, I mean from the end of April, May, all the way up until the end of August. So that's 4 months worth of reading. It's a lot. We have a lot to get through today. Don't actually know how many it is total. I did count and now I have forgotten. I feel like it was 28. Let's start off with part one. We'll start with poetry because I only read two poetry books, and that is the second two installments in the Women Are Some Kind of Magic trilogy by Amanda Lovelace. I read the first installment, The Princess Saves Herself, in this one in last November, so I will link the video where I discuss that one down below. And to be honest, my opinions on The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one and The Mermaid's Voice Returns in this one are pretty similar to my opinions on the first one. I struggle with this style of poetry. I'm still getting used to poetry as a form in general, though I haven't read a ton of it. And for me, it can be quite hit and miss. Like, some poems I really enjoy, but then some poems, they're just words. Like, I don't get it. I think this one is definitely my favourite of the trilogy. It really moved me at times, and I laughed, I smiled, I teared up. That doesn't mean you've connected with something. I don't know what does. So clearly I connected with this one on some level. I think this one might be my least favourite of the trilogy just because this one I connected with the least. The overall plot and themes didn't seem quite as cohesive as they did in the first two. It's hard critiquing this kind of story or material or writing, whatever you want to call it, because it's so personal and I feel so mean critiquing it. I think they're all worth a read if you're interested. I love the themes of like mermaids and witches. They just didn't super stand out to me. I would give The Witch Doesn't Burn in this one an 8 out of 10 and The Mermaid's Voice Returns in this one a 5 out of 10. Next up, let's talk about a couple of novellas because I read two novellas. First one is The Penelopiad by Margaret Atwood. This is the first Margaret Atwood thing that I read that wasn't a short story. I'd only ever read short stories of hers up until this point. I own The Handmaid's Tale. I will read The Handmaid's Tale. I've been wanting to read it for years. I just haven't gotten there yet. Feel a bit ashamed, can you tell? And The Penelopiad is raved about in terms of Greek myths and literature that has been revisited and revamped. Not really a retelling of the Odyssey, but kind of. It's Penelope's story. It's Penelope's story told from her perspective. Start before she's even married to Odysseus, and we go all the way up until I think after he dies. And it's raved about. People love it. And I enjoyed it. And I do think it's clever. I think there are little symbols in there that are well done, and I enjoyed reading it from her perspective and kind of hearing a little bit more feministy reasons as to why she thought certain things and why she did certain things and why she reacted to things, because we don't get her perspective of things in the Odyssey. For a very clever, capable character, it's kind of a bummer. Maybe we do at certain points. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I read the Odyssey. I feel like we don't. That's why this exists. But overall, I kind of found it a little bit overhyped. But to be fair, I had heard these classicists rave about it. And maybe from like that perspective, it's very well done. It was enjoyable, but it wasn't amazing. And actually, I kind of have a bone to pick with this because Helen is really villainized, and I can kind of see, like, from Penelope's perspective why Helen would be villainized, but it's a tired trope. I'm sick of seeing it. I think it would have been a lot more refreshing to see Helen from a more sympathetic viewpoint from Penelope, or even for Penelope to forgive Helen in the end. But Helen's just consistently brought to us as this really vain, uncaring creature. 7 out of 10 to The Penelopiad. And the second novella that I read over the summer was Heatwave by Victor Justin, translated by Sam Taylor. The biggest reason I wanted to pick this up was because it's got a blurb from Neela Slimani, who wrote Lullaby and Adele, and I loved both of those. I thought they were both really interesting and really well written, and Waterstones had been saying that this was popular, so I was like, why not? It's about a 17-year-old boy who's on holiday with his family over the summer at a campsite, and he watches another teenage boy die. He had a swing rope like stuck around his neck and he slowly strangled to death, and on impulse our main character buries the boy. He doesn't know why, he just does it. And we follow him for the next like 24 hours or so, maybe just over. It's a very strange concept. It's not explained much more than the way I just explained it to you, like the events of the book. He genuinely doesn't know why he does it. I really like the writing style, and it really conveyed the claustrophobia of his situation, but also the way he felt. He feels like an outsider, and he's going through, 17, the teenage angst, trying to figure out who you are, and you can really feel that every page of the book. Every now and then there'd be a really great line or a really great observation that I really enjoyed. There are a lot of symbols and metaphors in here, namely this pink bunny guy, which is both horrifying and hilarious. And overall, I really enjoyed it. It's only a short little thing. It's like 100 pages long or so. I read it pretty quickly. It was pretty easy to read. It was very interesting. Made me think a lot. I don't know if I'm going to come back and keep thinking to it now. Only time will tell with that one. I would probably give it like an 8 or an 8.5 out of 10. Now, welcome to the section that I like to call Natalie Haynes Stands Up for the Classics. Natalie Haynes Stands Up for the Classics is, I think it's technically a radio show, but you can listen to the first 4 seasons on Audible as like a combined thing. I didn't do that. I listened to them on Spotify as podcasts. Why would I pay a token for the first 4 seasons on Audible when I could listen to it for free on Spotify? So if Goodreads is going to let me count it as a book, I'm counting it as a book. I think there's 7 out of the time of me filming this video. I'm not up to date because she's just, as of filming this video, released a new season. I've listened to half of it. I've listened to 2 episodes and I have 2 more to go. I'll listen to them soon. There's no fear about that. Don't worry. I love this podcast. I love Natalie Haynes. I'm such a Natalie Haynes stan. It's ridiculous. She wrote what's it called? The Children of Jocasta and Pandora's Box. Pandora's Box is a non-fiction talking about 10 women from, like, fictional women from Greek mythology, and it's one of my favourite books of all time. I love that one. Children of Jocasta. It's also great. She also wrote 1,000 Ships, which is nothing but hype. She's a comedian and a classicist, and I find her hilarious. I find her so funny. Natalie Haynes Stands Up for the Classics is both really educational about a lot of key figures typically, but it's also so funny. I'd sit there and laugh to myself. I love having it on while I'm doing chores or cooking. I also put it on quite a few times just to sit outside in the sun this summer, have a nice drink in that time between, like, it's evening, dinner's about to start cooking, but you've got like a weird half hour and you don't know what to do. Sit outside and listen to Natalie Haynes Stand Up for the Classics. Amazing. I couldn't rate it higher. 5 out of 5 stars. 10 out of 10. Love this podcast. I mean, I just love Natalie Haynes. I'll listen to her do anything, honestly. I read 3 non-fiction books. Look at me reading a lot of non-fiction this year. First one is Cultish by Amanda Montell, The Language of Fanaticism. I listened to this via audiobook. It is narrated by the author. I find language and the way we use language really interesting, and I love cults. I love learning about cults. So it had a really great premise, really great idea behind it. I think the way cults in particular use language is probably very layered and intentional. Probably a lot of meat to chew there. And we did choose some meat here, don't get me wrong, but to me, it felt like we were talking about the subject. I didn't have any hard takeaways from it, just kind of more of like a general discussion. And it was still interesting, and I still think I learned some things. The other problem was it wasn't holding my attention very well. I don't know if it was the timing of reading it, I don't know if it's because I listened to it rather than sat down and read it, but because it's non-fiction, it's about language, I feel like we wouldn't have held my attention any better. I think audiobook was the best chance for it, and I kept zoning out, and then I didn't care enough to go. Sometimes I'd go back and figure out what I missed, and then sometimes it's like, you know what, I don't care, it doesn't sound that important, I'm just gonna keep going. Bummer. Just didn't stand out to me. It wasn't what I wanted it to be. I think it could have been structured a little bit better. I struggled knowing what to take away from it. Like, there were great little examples of here in the way that language is used, but didn't have a hardcore structure to it for the most part. Again, it just felt quite discussion-y and waffly, and then there's a time and a place for that, and I didn't want it here. If that doesn't bother you, then maybe you enjoy it. She did write one before this, I think it's called Sluttish, and I definitely am interested in picking it up and seeing what she writes in the future. I still think as a topic it's very interesting. Just wasn't my favourite. I love the cover though. The cover's really pretty. Next up is Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. I listened to this one via audiobook as well. I actually, funny enough, I read it because I wanted to watch the film. For years and years I wanted to watch the film. It's a cult classic. Julia Roberts, other famous actors that I can't remember the name of right now. And I kept seeing it come up on Netflix, but I'd always known, my mum had always said about how well the book had sold and how everyone swore by the book. And so I knew that if I ever watched it, I wanted to read the book first. So I finally read the book, and by the time I finished it, it wasn't on Netflix anymore. They'd taken it off. It was upsetting. I did still watch the film. Don't think it was as good. Julia Roberts were great, the cast were great. There was just no way it was gonna fit in everything this book fits in into even like a 2.5 hour film. It wasn't a short film by any means. Every chapter has something you can take away from it. To me, there are so many little tidbits and little pieces of information and little quotes that I took away, and I've changed the way I think about certain things. As you can see by my tabs, I really enjoyed this. It's just so rich of like self-discovery. If you don't know what it is about, it's about Elizabeth Gilbert, and she travels the world for a year. She goes through a really difficult divorce and then a really difficult breakup. She doesn't feel settled in her life. She wants to connect with God better. She wants to learn ways of pleasure in the world better, and she wants to connect the two together. So she spends 3 months in Rome learning about pleasure, 3 months in India, it's in an ashram doing yoga and meditation and learning about spirituality and God, and then 3 months in Bali with a medicine man, and she's trying to put the two together, trying to balance out between pleasure and her spirituality. And it really is just about that, but it's also about self-acceptance and healing and moving on and forgiving yourself and a more positive, grounded way to view the world. And I just had a grand old time. I didn't think I was gonna love it as much as I did. I thought it sounded a bit wishy-washy, a bit airy-fairy. I'm not a hugely spiritual person, and you don't have to be to read it and to acknowledge the things she says and even connect with the things she says. And the audiobook is fantastic. I cannot recommend it enough. The way Elizabeth just had such a soft tone, and I looked forward to spending my time with Liz. It was like hanging out with a friend. I so enjoyed it. Highly recommend the audiobook if you were thinking about picking this up. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I really enjoyed it. 9 out of 10 to Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert. Gilbert. And then on a similar vein, and this was purposeful, the next one I read was Tiny Beautiful Things by Cheryl Strayed. Cheryl Strayed was an agony aunt for a column. She was called Sugar, so they would write in Dear Sugar. The cover here says advice on living life from someone who's been there. She also, as this little annoying sticker, it's not a sticker, it's stuck on there, shows us, wrote Wild, which is she like backpacked across the coast or something crazy all by herself. Like she wasn't happy with her life, and so she just got up and left. And I do want to read this one as well. Kind of reminds me of Eat, Pray, Love a little bit. It makes me think of Tracks by, here, I'll show it to you. Tracks by Robin Davidson. I read this in uni, and it's about a woman in Australia, and she just travels across the outback by herself and a couple camels. Who knew? Who knew this was a genre that I loved? Anyway, this isn't about that, but she's been through some stuff. And so people would write into her and she would give responses, and that's what this is. It's a collection of people sending in their letters and her responding. And I really love this one as well. Her advice is so empathetic. She tells so many stories about her and her own life, and she's just so unflinching in the way she does it and so brave in the way she does it. She gives some serious advice. Like she doesn't beat around the bush. She says it how it is a lot of the time, but in such a kind and empathetic way that it never sounds harsh. And I felt every emotion you could possibly feel reading this book. I laughed, I cried, I felt the warm fuzzies. There's one story, and I'm never gonna forget this. If you read it, it's about the guy who was a dragon. I was doing yoga at the time, and I just like stopped and like listened to the story. I just started crying. I was like, what just happened? And like the story about the teenage girls, the story about the angry boys. There are so many great stories in here. Really think I'm gonna want to reread this one day. I listened to this as an audiobook as well, and this was also rated by Cheryl, and it's also so good. If you want to pick this up, I so highly recommend the audiobook. It's so worth it to hear Cheryl tell it to you herself. There's nothing else to say. 9 out of 10 to Tiny Beautiful Things. Very much so. Looking forward to reading Wild by her. Let's talk about some graphic novels. I read 7 graphic novels in total. The first 2 that I read are Giant Days Volume 12 and Volume 13. I literally talk about these in every wrap up I do. They're really fun and goofy and sweet and funny. Some of them are sillier than others. Volume 12 I enjoyed as much as I do most of them on like a good installment, I think. Like an 8 out of 10. This one was a little anticlimactic considering it was the penultimate, gearing up to them graduating. And I didn't feel any of like the we're about to graduate stress. Can't remember if they talk about dissertations much. It was fine. So I'd give this one like a 7 out of 10. Next graphic novel I finished was Sheets by Brenna Thumler. This is about, for Marjorie Glatt, being 13 years old isn't quite the same as it is for everyone else. Responsible for running her family's laundromat while trying to survive middle school, Marjorie's daily struggles include persnickety customers, snippy classmates, agonizing swim lessons, and laundry, always laundry. And then Wendell is a ghost. He ghosts in this world are made out of sheets. He doesn't quite feel like he fits in with the other sheets, the other ghosts. The two bump into each other. The art style of this one is really cute, really fun, really loved the color scheme. I loved the small town vibes this had and the like October vibes. This is one of my favorite pictures. I love this one. For me, there are a lot of big emotions in this and a lot of kind of relationship drama that just happened way too quickly for me to feel satisfied with it, to feel the weight of it, to kind of believe in it and invest in it. And that's my biggest problem with this, but I still enjoyed it. I would give it, I don't know, because it's really sweet and it's really cute and I love what it stands for. But I just wanted it to be longer or like serialized, and I know there's a sequel and I'm definitely gonna read the sequel. I think like a solid 3 stars. I think a 6 out of 10. And this is apparently like the special edition. I just saw it in hardcover and the spine is sparkly. Can you tell? Oh, can you tell? Can you see the sparkles? I look so weird. I'm just like in the corner like a little weirdo. Nice edition. It cost £20, so I don't know if it was worth it. What's next? Oh! This is one that I've been meaning to read forever. I owned it for years now and I finally finished it. The amount of times I started this one and then got like 50, 100 pages in and then never carried on from there, I was going crazy. And that is Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. This one is like a fantasy graphic novel in like a very traditional sense. It's about this guy, his name is Lord Ballister. This is Nimona, she becomes his sidekick and they're trying to bring down like a corrupt system. Prove to the kingdom that Sir Ambrosia Goldenheart and his buddies are the institution of law enforcement and Heroics aren't the heroes everyone thinks they are. This guy right here is, what's his name? Sir Ambrosius Goldenloin. And it was fun. It was not my personal sense of humour for the most part, but I did love the relationships and the complexity. I loved like the traditional fantasy aspect. It was really well paced, this one. Didn't feel too long or too short. It's like a decent length, like 250 pages long, which for a graphic novel, it's a good amount of time. So I appreciated that because most of the time my problem with graphic novels are how quick they are and it's not enough time for me to feel the emotions, and I didn't find that with this one. My biggest problem with this one is I don't quite understand, there's like way things come together and are explained. I don't know if I understood what happened, what they meant. I was just left kind of a bit like, huh? So I'm not sure if I got it or not in the end. The artwork for Nimona is quite fun. It reminds me a lot of like Adventure Time, that, you know, those Cartoon Network shows. And I mean, it was fun and a sweet story. It didn't wow me. I think I'd give this one a 7 out of 10. I think it deserves the 7 because it's cute and it's smart and there is symbolism in here. Next up is volume 4 of Something is Killing the Children. I must have talked about this before. I can't remember in what video I do, but I will link it down below if you want to hear my opinions on the first 3. The first 3 feel like a trilogy, and I wasn't sure which direction it was going to go in after that because it felt like the story had happened, but I was intrigued to see where it went because I was really interested in the world, and we didn't learn a ton of like the mythology behind it and like the systems behind it. It's set in a world where monsters are real and they eat children, and there are these hunters and they kill the monsters so they don't eat the children. There are a lot of rules and a whole system in the way it's done. And in this one, it's kind of like a prequel. We see one of our lead characters, Erica, when she's younger and how she gets into it, and because of that, a lot of it is explained, and I loved learning how it all worked. I had been wanting this all 3, and I So just loved hearing Erica's backstory, and I really enjoyed this one. I think it's definitely my favourite of the series so far, and I kind of hope we continue on this track of seeing like how Erica goes through this. I wouldn't mind if the whole series is just made of like mini trilogies of different stories. Yeah, I think it was a really strong installment, and I'm now really excited for volume 5. I sat down just to read like the first issue, and I ended up reading the whole thing within like an hour. I couldn't put it down. What did I give this? I gave this an 8 out of 10. Great. Next up, on a similar theme, is House of Slaughter, The Butcher's Mark, Volume 1, in a spin-off series from Something is Killing the Children. What's your name? Aaron? Aaron Slaughter. Erica's, I mean it says on the back, Erica's handler and rival, and we do meet him. I want to say it's volume 2 we meet him. It might be 1, it might be 3, and we also see him in volume 4 as like a kid when they first meet and stuff. And this is also set mostly in those prequel times when he is a kid, but then we do jump to present. Now, is it present before, during, or after the events of the first 3 volumes of Something's Killing the Children? I don't know. I don't know when it's set exactly. I would presume after, but I don't know. It'd be nice if the two wove together at some point in the future, because there is a plot line that they're starting to go down in this one. But there's a new boy introduced to the House of Slaughter. I can't for the life of me remember his name, and I can't find it. No one's saying it. Jace Butcher is introduced to the House of Slaughter, and he mixes things up, and we see him in both time slots, the past and the present. And it's an interesting premise. I enjoyed this one. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed Volume 4 of the main series, but I like the direction this is going in. I really hope they weave together at some point. I think that could be really cool. This series is getting stronger in my opinion, and I'm like just love where this whole world is going. I would give this one 7 out of 10, I guess. And the last graphic novel that I read over the summer was, maybe I should get it first. The last graphic novel I read this summer was Lore Olympus Volume 2. This series is really sweet and fun. It's a retelling of Hades and Persephone, but a less traumatizing, well, I mean debatable. It's not Hades is doing the traumatizing, let's put it that way. And this one is made up of lots of tiny little episodes, so the pacing this one's really nice as well. I love the artwork and the style and the colours. It's really fun. The characters are really fun. It gives you like the warm fuzzy feelings, and it's like full of drama and just makes you want to clench your fist and shake it. And I've been really enjoying this series. It's fun and I'm really enjoying it. I think I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I did really enjoy this volume. And those are all the graphic novels, and this concludes the end of part 1 of this saga of books I read over the summer. I don't think I'm going to get to film part 2 today. I think that's going to have to be a separate video. So keep your eye out for part 2 if you're interested, and I'm going to talk about all the books that I read. I read 13 in total, so that one will also be a decent length, I imagine. What do the books include? Can I give you a sneak peek? I don't even know. Conversations with Friends, Until the End, the last book in the Skullduggery Pleasant series. Dune Messiah. We've got some Christina Lauren in there. We've got some Greek myth retellings. Piranesi by Susanna Clark. If you enjoyed this video, giving it a thumbs up and subscribing would really help out my channel. Other than that, I hope you have an amazing morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye!